So, what happened to all of the weapons and kit that were left scattered on World War II battlefields once the fighting had moved on? In two previous videos, I've dealt with some of this story. Firstly, how German tanks and other armoured fighting vehicles were recovered and many of them later scrapped. And also how some other weapons and kit were gathered up and sometimes recycled or sent for storage. But this time I want to look more closely at the job of actually gathering up the weapons and kit that was scattered across battlefields. Who did it and what conditions did they work in? Soldiers on both sides often lay dead where they fell, and their corpses would be dealt with by special units called graves registration, or sometimes buried by their own comrades or enemies. But of course an awful lot of kit and weapons were left strewn about on battlefields, with much of it dangerous. They were littered with uniform parts, helmets, webbing, ammunition, personal kit, weapons, and sundry mundane items. In this program we will look at the dirty, forgotten work of battlefield salvage conducted by the US Army in Europe. The word salvage is appropriate, for a lot of the equipment, particularly American kit and weapons, would be collected and sent to the rear for reconditioning and reissue. German weapons and equipment were collected up as well to ensure that enemy weapons were controlled and enemy kit was tidied up and disposed of. Ordnance and weapons would need to be removed to protect local civilians from harm and for the safety of troops garrisoning particular areas. The men often ordered to carry out this task were members of the service company of U.S. infantry regiments. The service company was there to support the rifle companies of the infantry regiment. It was divided into 10 distinct sections, numbering about 115 officers and men, and was equipped with its own vehicles. Although usually overlooked in discussions of World War II history, the service company was absolutely vital to ensuring the efficiency of the infantry regiment. The service company's 10 sections were company headquarters, regimental supply, ammunition, motor transport maintenance, transportation, postal, personnel, special services, that is, largely organizing leisure activities and special rations, and public relations. Though a step back from the rifle companies, the service company was often exposed to enemy fire, particularly artillery fire, and in desperate situations the men could be called upon to fight or provide reinforcements to the other companies. All of its soldiers were infantrymen first and specialists second. Here we see men of the Regimental Supply Section of the 330th Infantry Regiment Service Company, part of the U.S. 83rd Infantry Division, at work on the 18th of December 1944, near the German town of Schevenhütte, on the edge of the Hürtgen Forest, where for 88 days German defences in the gloomy forests on the Reich's frontier had chewed up U.S. divisions at an alarming rate. The Americans had failed to break through. It was one of the last German victories of World War II. The Battle of the Hürtgen Forest cost the Americans at least 33,000 killed and wounded, with some sources stating as high as 55,000, while the defensive Germans lost some 28,000 men. The battle officially ended on the 16th of December 1944, 2 days before this film was shot, and the same day that Hitler launched the Ardennes offensive. Here we see GIs loading German and US rifles and machine guns in their utility vehicle. These weapons have all been laying outside in bad weather and mud for some time, judging by their condition, and are thrown about like so much lumber by the GIs. The M1 rifles we see could very well have been sent further back behind the lines to ordnance depots to be repaired and reconditioned and probably issued again, while the German rifles and machine guns could well have been cleaned, repaired, and shipped to the US or other places and placed into storage. Quite a lot of stored Axis firearms were later gifted to friendly states post-war. We also see the GIs recovering a larger German weapon, what looks to be a PaK-40 75mm anti-tank gun. You can see shrapnel and or bullet damage to the gun's shield, indicating the nature of the fighting it went through. These establishing shots show the kind of materials the regimental supply guys were salvaging. Piles of stretchers, clothing, jerry cans of fuel. These are wooden crates that once held US anti-tank shells. Here we see piles of German webbing and belts of ammunition for a German machine gun. On the right is a live bazooka anti-tank rocket. Here we see GI's boots and clothing. Coupled with the stretchers, it looks like the remains of a casualty clearing station, with discarded US belt kits as well. In all probability, we are looking at the effects of dead soldiers. Piles of US M5 gas masks and their carrying bags are seen. Another German weapon, this time a rather peculiar rocket gun, an 88mm Raketenwerfer 43. Piles of US water canteens, and a mound of M1942 mess kits and the tin cups from canteens. A US utility vehicle arrives at a dump of some kind, where material gathered from the battlefield will be sorted, with some going for scrapping, some for reconditioning, and some just buried or burned. We see a German helmet, a US entrenching tool, US ammunition bandoliers, canteens, clothing, US M1 helmets, and all sorts of military kit. Here we see a very dirty and probably rusty Sturmgewehr 44, a late-war German weapon that has often been called the father of the modern assault rifle. The GIs have no idea that 80 years later this weapon would be worth over $30,000. This M1 helmet shows the ferocity of war, shredded by shrapnel or bullets. On the left is a German M31 canteen with its felt-covered body and metal cup. A battle-worn and muddy German MG-34 machine gun. All sorts of US equipment is thrown off the truck for recycling or destruction, including an M1 carbine. It was often noted by World War II veterans that the guys in these service companies and other support units further back often had the best opportunities to take souvenirs, particularly weapons, for themselves, as they handled and processed huge quantities of such equipment. The precise number of firearms brought to the US by returning servicemen in 1945 is not known, but the number was huge. By way of an example, when 5,000 men of the 28th Infantry Division shipped home, they were found to be carrying over 20,000 German weapons. Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.